Welcome to While We Were Distracted, the podcast where we explore topics that often get overshadowed in the rush of daily life.
You know that moment when you're like sitting on your couch on a lazy afternoon and a single beam of sunlight is shining through the window?
Oh, yeah. Best time of day.
Right. You look at that beam of light and you can see all those thousands of tiny, lazy dust motes just, drifting and swirling in the air. We've all seen it.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what if I told you that those microscopic specks floating in your living room weren't just dust? Like, what if they were actually microscopic computers communicating with each other, measuring the temperature of the room, listening to your voice, and actively scanning your heart rate?
It's an incredibly jarring image, isn't it?
It really is.
It takes something completely mundane, something we literally ignore every single day, and turns it into this, profound technological frontier.
Yeah, it really does.
Yeah.
So today on our deep dive, our mission is singularly focused on smart dust. We're going to decode exactly what this technology is on a physical level, and then we're going to explore exactly how it would work in your daily life. We are pulling from a really fascinating stack of sources today. We've got a deep text cybersecurity blog from Forescout, an accessible breakdown from SlashGear, and a stunningly detailed U.S. patent.
Yeah, specifically US 11354-666B1, which was filed by Wells Fargo Bank.
Exactly. Okay, let's unpack this because, when I hear smart dust, my brain immediately goes to, nanotechnology from a sci-fi movie.
Sure, yeah.
Are we talking about Hollywood fiction here, or is this something physically sitting on engineering workbenches right now?
It is absolutely sitting on workbenches right now. To clear the air of the science fiction, let's look at the strict physical reality of what we are dealing with here.
Okay, lay it on me.
According to both the SlashGear breakdown and the Forescout analysis, smart dust is a classification for what are called MEMS.
MEMS.
Yeah, MEMS. That stands for micro-electromechanical systems. And individually, engineers actually refer to these tiny devices as motes.
Oh, just like a mote of dust.
Precisely. Now,
Yeah.
to be officially classified as a smart dust mote, the entire sensor package must be 1 cubic millimeter or smaller.
Wait, 1 millimeter?
Yeah. To visualize that, take a standard wooden ruler and look at the little millimeter lines. Now imagine a three-dimensional cube that fits perfectly inside one of those tiny spaces.
That is almost incomprehensibly small for a computer. How do you even build something like that?
Well, they're manufactured using advanced photolithography. It's similar to how we print computer chips, primarily out of silicon.
Okay.
And because they are so small, they weigh only a few micrograms. But here is the most crucial part. Despite being the size of a grain of sand, a single mote is a complete package.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning it contains a sensor to measure its environment, a computational processor to analyze data, a communication module to transmit that data wirelessly, and crucially, its own power source.
Wait, hold on. A power source?
Yeah.
You can't exactly fit a standard battery inside a 1 millimeter cube.
Yeah.
How does a speck of dust power itself?
See, that is where the engineering gets truly brilliant. They don't rely on traditional chemical batteries that run out and, need replacing. Instead, many of these motes are designed to harvest ambient energy from their environment. They use piezoelectric materials.
Piezoelectric, meaning they generate power from movement.
Exactly. They can convert ambient mechanical stress into electricity. So if a heavy truck drives by, or if there's just ambient sound in the room, the microscopic vibrations cause the silicon to bend just a fraction of a nanometer.
Wow.
And that tiny bend generates a minute electrical charge, just enough to power the mote's processor and send a signal.
That's wild.
They can also harvest thermal energy from changes in room temperature. So they are essentially feeding off the physical world around them.
Okay, so you're telling me they are smaller than a grain of sand, entirely invisible to the naked eye once dispersed, and they power themselves indefinitely just by existing in a noisy room?
Pretty much.
It's that exact invisibility that triggered an absolute public meltdown recently. Which brings up the FogVid24 incident from 2024.
Right, yeah. The FogVid24 panic. That was a fascinating moment of public anxiety, just totally colliding with a profound misunderstanding of how this technology actually scales.
Yeah, for those who might not remember, in 2024, a massive, highly unusual blanket of fog covered parts of the United Kingdom and North America, and the internet just exploded.
It really did.
A massive contingent of people settled on blaming DARPA-funded smart dust, They thought governments had released a continental cloud of these invisible motes to spy on everyone, essentially creating a fake weather event.
Right.
It reminds me of the early days of Wi-Fi, when people were terrified of invisible waves passing through their bodies. Are we just scared of what we can't see?
We definitely are. And as the /gear source points out, creating a continental spy fog is completely physically impossible at this stage of development.
Is it a limitation of the size?
It's a limitation of scale and network infrastructure, really. To create a weather-level fog that covers half the northern hemisphere, you would need trillions upon trillions of these MEMS deployed simultaneously.
Oh, I see.
You have to remember, each mote has to transmit its data back to a central hub. If you had trillions of devices suddenly pinging the network, the bandwidth requirements would instantly crash any routing system on Earth.
Right, the internet would just break.
Completely. The cost and the network infrastructure required to process data from trillions of motes simply do not exist.
So, if millions of these things are way too expensive to create a fake weather event, where's the financial incentive to actually build them? Like, what is the practical application right now?
What's fascinating here is that the true capabilities of these microscopic sensors, the things they are actually built to do, are highly targeted and practical.
Okay, like what?
Like in agriculture. Instead of trillions, you might scatter a few thousand motes over hundreds of acres of crops.
Oh, nice.
The motes monitor soil moisture, nitrogen levels, pest activity, and they transmit that data back to perfectly optimize watering and fertilization.
That makes total sense.
Or, in heavy industry, they are embedded inside massive steel machinery to detect microscopic vibrations or early corrosion. They predict a catastrophic failure of a turbine before it ever happens.
Okay, I can entirely see the value for heavy machinery or vast agricultural fields.
Yeah.
But agriculture and steel mills are massive, open environments. What happens when you apply this technology to something as enclosed and sensitive as, say, the human body? Because /gear mentions internal medicine applications.
Yes, they do. The medical goal is to ingest or inject these motes so they can travel directly through your bloodstream.
Wow.
Because they are so small, they can navigate your capillaries, performing real-time diagnostics from the inside out, which could potentially eliminate the need for invasive exploratory surgery entirely.
That sounds incredibly beneficial. But if we are talking about devices that are small enough to enter the human bloodstream, that brings us right to the Forescout source.
It does.
Forescout is a cybersecurity firm. They aren't looking at crop yields. They were looking at threat and defense.
Yeah.
And their analysis of what happens when these enter a secure environment is chilling.
Yeah. Forescout outlines what they consider the nightmare scenario for secure facilities.
Let's hear it.
Think about a top-secret government lab or a highly secure corporate research center. They have armed guards, multi-factor badge scanners, heavy biometric locks. They are supposedly impenetrable from the outside.
Right.
But if a bad actor drops a literal handful of smart dust on the sidewalk right outside the entrance of that facility,
The personnel just walk right through it on their way to work.
Exactly. They walk through the invisible cloud, the motes attached to the fibers of their clothes, they get stuck in their hair, and because they are so astonishingly light, they become airborne with the slightest movement.
Oh, no.
And then the personnel actually inhaled them.
It's not just a microscopic Trojan horse. It's far worse.
Right.
It's like the fortress security guards are willingly breathing in the enemy spies, holding them in their own lungs, and then exhaling them directly onto the secure server racks inside the vault.
Yeah.
And you have absolutely no idea you are the vehicle for the breach.
And that is exactly why Forescout points out that traditional physical security measures become utterly ineffectual. Hazmat suits, decontamination showers, clothing changes, none of it guarantees you've removed every cubic millimeter speck.
That's terrifying.
And even broad-spectrum communications jamming inside the lab doesn't solve the problem because the dust doesn't need to transmit the data immediately. It just stores the observations.
Oh, so it just waits.
Yes. When that employee leaves the secure environment at the end of the day and walks back to their car, they exhale the dust, or the dust simply uses the unjammed cell network outside to transmit the stolen data back to the bad actor.
So how on earth do you defend against that? If you can't see it, you can't filter it out, and you can't permanently jam it.
Well, according to Forescout, the only current defense is absolute network visibility.
Meaning what?
You cannot stop the dust from entering, and you cannot stop it from observing. But to be an effective espionage tool, the device eventually has to communicate what it learns. It has to phone home.
Right.
So the defense strategy relies on intensely monitoring your own network traffic, catching the devices the exact millisecond they attempt to transmit data, and blocking that transmission. You can't blind the spy, so you have to cut the phone line.
Man. This raises an important question. If these sensors are capable of penetrating highly secure, multi-million-dollar government labs, how might major corporations want to use them in our everyday consumer lives?
Well, they definitely want to.
Because corporations are always looking for the most secure way to verify who we are. Which brings us to the absolute core of our deep dive today.
Yes. Patent US 113546666B1, assigned to Wells Fargo Bank.
This patent completely bridges the gap between theoretical nanotechnology and your Tuesday morning trip to the grocery store. It is essentially an architectural blueprint for how this technology would actually work for you, the consumer.
It really is.
Let's set up the problem Wells Fargo is trying to solve. Right now, we use mobile payments like Apple Pay or physical smart cards with chip and PIA technology.
And while chip and PIN is certainly an improvement over the old magnetic stripes, it still suffers from fraud.
Obviously.
If someone steals your physical card and happens to know your PIN, the system happily validates the transaction. The fundamental flaw with current point-of-sale technology is that it authenticates the device or the plastic card, but it cannot mathematically guarantee that you, the actual authorized human being, are physically present standing in front of the register at the time of payment.
So Wells Fargo's solution, and again, this is a real filed patent, is a point-of-sale system that authenticates your payment using a cloud of smart dust. Let's walk through the exact physical mechanics of this. Imagine you are standing at a cash register to buy a coffee. How does the dust interact with you?
The patent describes a base station, which would be seamlessly integrated into the cash register or the payment terminal itself. When you initiate a transaction, the base station releases a localized burst of motes.
Okay.
They can be suspended in the air around you using microscopic propulsion, or they can simply move passively using air currents and something called Brownian motion.
Brownian motion?
Yes, it's the random erratic motion of microscopic particles suspended in a fluid or gas caused by continuous collisions with the molecules of the surrounding air.
So it's just natural physics keeping them afloat.
Essentially, yeah. The ambient heat and air pressure in the room keep the dust naturally bouncing and floating around your upper body.
So an invisible cloud of sensors literally surrounds your face and chest at the checkout line.
Right.
What exactly are they measuring?
They're collecting a massive, multi-layered array of biometric data. The patent details several specialized sensors working simultaneously.
Like what?
Optical sensors capture micro-images of your face for facial recognition. Audio sensors listen to the ambient sound, identifying the unique resonance of your voice.
Okay, face and voice. That's fairly standard. I mean, we do that with our smartphones now. But the patent goes much further, doesn't it?
Significantly further. Infrared sensors in the motes measure your exact core body temperature and determine your specific breathing rate.
Wow.
And perhaps most astonishingly, motion and air pressure sensors in the dust can monitor your pulse and calculate your blood pressure without ever actually touching your skin.
Wait, stop. How can a speck of dust floating in the air read my pulse if it isn't touching me?
Think about the mechanics of a heartbeat. When your heart beats, your radial artery expands. Your skin physically bulges outward by a microscopic fraction of a millimeter.
Okay.
When your skin pushes out, it displaces the air right next to it, creating an incredibly tiny, invisible wave of air pressure. Because the smart dust is so light, it acts like a buoy floating on the ocean. It physically rides that invisible airwave.
No way.
Yes. By measuring the rhythm of those airwaves, the mote calculates your exact resting heart rate.
Here's where it gets really interesting and honestly profoundly dystopian.
Yeah.
The sheer intimacy of this data collection is staggering. It's one thing to press my thumb on a glass scanner. It's another thing entirely to have a cash register blow a cloud of invisible sensors into my face, to ride the airwaves off my skin, check my blood pressure, and measure my body heat just so I can buy a latte.
It is a lot.
It feels like the ultimate trade-off of our biological privacy for consumer convenience.
It sounds dystopian, I agree. But look at it from the bank's perspective. It's pure cold engineering logic. Current single-point biometrics like a thumbprint or a single facial scan are actively failing.
Right, because of deepfakes and stuff.
Exactly. High-resolution photos, 3D-printed silicone masks, or cloned voice files can spoof current systems. But you cannot spoof a perfectly synchronized combination of your facial geometry, your unique vocal resonance, your core body temperature, and your specific resting heart rate, all at the exact same localized moment.
Oh, I see.
It creates an authentication profile that is mathematically impossible to hack or replicate.
Okay, I see the logic. It's the ultimate lock. But knowing that a cloud of dust is riding the air to read my pulse, I need to understand the mechanism of how this chaotic cloud of floating sensors actually reaches a secure banking decision. Like, how do we get from floating dust to an approved transaction?
This is where we transition from the physical experience to the algorithmic execution. The patent uses a very specific analogy to explain how the base station organizes the motes. They call it the makeup kit concept.
Wait, a makeup kit?
Yeah.
I'm struggling to see how foundation and eyeliner connect to banking cryptography. Walk me through that.
Right, I know it sounds weird, but think of it this way. When a bank issues this system, they supply a pre-configured set of motes referred to as a family.
Okay.
Let's say it's a family of 8 motes. In a makeup kit, you have foundation, concealer, blush, mascara. Each item serves a highly specific individual purpose, and you don't always use all of them. In the Smart Dust family, they are a specialized team. One mote is solely dedicated to GPS location, another to ambient temperature, another to infrared, another to audio.
So the base station doesn't just use everything all at once.
Exactly. The system uses a dynamic selection process. The base station evaluates the environmental context in real time. If you are trying to buy something in a dimly lit restaurant, the base station realizes the lighting is poor, so it dynamically deactivates the optical sensors because the facial recognition data would be blurry and useless.
Oh, clever.
If you are at a loud concert, it ignores the audio sensors and relies instead on your body temperature and air pressure pulse readings. It actively excludes any motes that have a bad signal-to-noise ratio.
So it's constantly adapting to the physical environment to find the cleanest possible data. Once it selects the best motes for the situation, how does it finalize the math to approve the payment?
It comes down to a cryptographic finish utilizing something called NCR probability.
Okay, math time.
Let's say the base station selects 4 specific motes out of the 8 available in the family. NCR is a mathematical formula for combinations. There are 70 different ways to choose 4 motes out of 8.
Right.
By randomly selecting a different combination of sensors for every single transaction, the system creates constantly shifting, randomized locks. Even if a hacker miraculously intercepts one transaction, the next transaction a millisecond later will require a completely different mathematical combination of sensors.
That shifting lock concept makes total sense.
Yeah.
And the patent mentioned that your actual biometric data is stored as a BLOB, right?
Yes, a binary large object. Instead of saving an image file of your face or a recording of your voice, which can be stolen from a server, the system translates the exact geometry of your face, voice, and pulse into a massive abstract clump of pure math.
So that is the BLOB.
That is the BLOB. The selected motes combine their unique individual hardware serial numbers with your biometric BLOB to form what the patent calls a smart key.
So if a hacker steals the BLOB from the bank's server, it's totally useless to them, because without the exact hardware serial numbers from those specific floating motes at that exact second, the BLOB just looks like random static.
Precisely. That temporary smart key acts as a highly secure virtual card number. The base station sends that smart key to the server, and your payment is approved.
Wow.
And as a final layer of defense, the family of motes forms a closed circuit. If a foreign mote, say, a hacker's own smart dust, trying to intercept the signal attempts to enter the localized network, the circuit breaks instantly, locking out the bad actor and terminating the transaction.
So what does this all mean? If I can try to put a different analogy on this to make sense of the math, it feels like the motes are an orchestra tuning up.
Okay, I like that.
The base station is the conductor. You walk up to the register, and the conductor assesses the concert hall. If the room is too dark, he silences the violins, the optical sensors. If the room is too loud, he silences the brass, the audio sensors. Instead, he points to the cellos and the percussion, the pressure and temperature sensors to play the exact right, incredibly complex mathematical chord. And that shifting chord is the smart key that unlocks your bank account.
That is a phenomenal analogy. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this localized orchestra of sensors represents a massive paradigm shift in how machines verify human identity.
Yeah.
We are moving away from what you have a plastic card in your pocket to who you are, at a microscopic physiological level.
It really is a complete shift in our relationship with technology.
Hmm.
Let's synthesize the journey we've been on today. We started by defining the strict engineering reality of smart dust, cubic millimeter silicon structures that harvest their own energy and contain entire computer systems.
Yep.
We cleared away the FOGVID-24 conspiracy theories, acknowledging that while they can't create continental weather events, they are currently being deployed to revolutionize crop yields and navigate our bloodstream.
And from there, we looked at the cybersecurity threat. The terrifying reality of an espionage sensor so small it can be unwittingly inhaled, bypassing every physical security measure we currently possess.
Which led us straight to the Wells Fargo patent. A future where buying your groceries involves an invisible cloud of self-propelled sensors riding the microscopic airwaves of your heartbeat to generate a shifting cryptographic key. The reason you should care about this is that this technology sits at the exact, unavoidable intersection of ultimate, frictionless consumer convenience and absolute biological surveillance.
And that tension between frictionless convenience and total surveillance leaves us with a final, rather provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
We talked earlier about the four-scout defense strategy, that the only way to defend against rogue smart dust in a secure lab is absolute network visibility. You have to catch it and block its communication. You have to cut the phone line. But what happens when smart dust is no longer a rogue espionage tool? What happens when this biometric authentication is universally integrated into the essential services of our society, like banking, healthcare access, and public transit?
Oh, man.
If the only way to protect your physical privacy is to actively block these sensors from communicating, will doing so ultimately render you a ghost? In a world where your heartbeat is your credit card and your breath is your passport, does choosing to block the dust mean you are entirely locked out of modern society?
That is a heavy, heavy question to leave on. If you block the dust to keep your privacy, do you accidentally block yourself out of the world entirely? It brings us right back to that sunbeam in your living room.
It sure does.
The next time you see those dust motes swirling lazily in the light, you might look at them just a little bit differently. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the sources today. We hope we unpacked the reality, the underlying mechanics, and the future of smart dust for you.
Don't forget to like and subscribe for the next episode on While We Were Distracted.